Now, Angelina came into the study as a doctoral student in clinical psychology. And as we progressed, her experience within the program turned out extremely different from anybody else who participated, or actually most of the people that I've worked with. It left me with an important question of whether or not it's possible to open too much of the mind's eye, or maybe too much too fast, but we'll get to that. First, let's talk about where Angelina started the program at. What was she experiencing when she began? So Angelina began the program with the experience of aphantasia in that she couldn't conjure conscious mental imagery at will. Here's her in her own words.
So I think when I found your page, I was like, oh my God, that's me. And it was sort of a revelation that I had been experiencing aphantasia for my whole life. When I tried to imagine things or visualize things in my mind's eye, I could access other senses, but not the visual senses. So I could hear things or like feel things. I could access sort of the emotional component of whatever I was imagining or visualizing, but not the actual picture. It felt like it was like behind me. Like it felt like there was a picture there that I could remember, but I couldn't see it. Like every time I like turned to look at it, it would like still be behind me. So I couldn't really like put my finger on it and look at it.
Now, because of the training and stuff in the field she was in, and a lot of inner work she had already done, she had this like really profound sense of inner awareness already developed. So in that sense, she had a huge advantage of her starting point because she had already had a lot of the mental skills necessary to develop some of these things. And on our initial interview call, which I wish I had recorded those, for some reason I didn't, she also mentioned some possibility that her experience of aphantasia might be related to some specific life events that were traumatic when she was younger. We've seen from some of the research, not my firm, but others, have seen that aphantasia indeed can be caused by traumatic life events. And up until this point, I had been very cautious with people in terms of working with them if they thought that their aphantasia was caused by trauma, since there may be a very real possibility that these types of individuals, that their psyche had shut down mental imagery as some sort of survival tactic. So maybe there's a good reason why their mind is not allowing them to visualize. And really, there's no telling of what would happen if they did unlock mental imagery or what would be unleashed. So Angelina and I discussed that at length on this first call, and the possibility that if her mind's eye did come online, that some unwanted experiences could follow. We also discussed what sort of support system she had in place around her, just in case she did want to participate and some things did open up. She ended up expressing that she was very confident in her own training, her own ability, but also in her network of people that she was working around with, thanks to her doctoral program. I guess that would add a lot of confidence to somebody's journey, knowing you have a team of professionals around you that you can pull on. So she felt good that if stuff did start to open up for her, whether emotional or psychological, that she'd be able to navigate it accordingly. She thought that the risk of that was well worth the investment of time and effort. So I decided to have her participate and move forward cautiously. So we jumped into session 1, and it was pretty uneventful, actually. Skimming back through the session as I listen to it now, there really wasn't anything noteworthy that I'd even include in the video. And that's pretty typical for session 1, I would say. Like most people, it's more of like a warm-up session, just get some things understood, get on the same page about a few things, get used to the exercises, how they feel to do. So we wrapped up session 1, moved on. And gotta be honest, going into session 2, I really wasn't super expectant that anything out of the norm might happen. But really, as soon as we started, there were some signs that this was not going to be your average series of sessions. Check out this clip from her.
We got 2 sessions in, and then I started having some pretty wildly different perceptions. I have some updates for you.
Oh, okay. Let's hear.
Yeah, I had more visual dream memory than I usually do. Usually when I remember my dreams, I remember sort of like a vague, and I just remember sort of the feelings of it.
Mm-hmm.
But in this dream, when I woke up, it was like I could remember like seeing someone's name written on a piece of paper. This specific person is named Emily, and she wrote her name down in this specific way on this paper that looks like this.
I mean, is it something that you can still recall what it looked like to some extent?
Yeah. Not as clearly, but
I still sort of have an image.
Okay, so far, she had already experienced a super vivid dream and was able to recall it visually a little bit, which was out of her norm at that time. And this is only after session one and then no practice in between. Pretty wild.
Yeah. Yeah. I think it's also just like me thinking about it differently and being like, oh, like I am learning how to visualize, like, changing the narrative.
Now, what she said there is actually super important. I've talked about it before. I'll talk about it again. I'll keep talking about it. That everything that I do here, or everything that anybody does within trying to generate mind's eye activity, seems, in my opinion, to hinge around metacognition, the ability to dissect and understand your own thought process. In other words, it's not good enough that we say that we can recall something. What's really more important is how we recall the thing that we're recalling. Is the memory occurring in just words? Is it a sense of something outside of just words? That's what's important. Because here's the reality, without some skill in metacognition, somebody could have the craziest breakthroughs in their mind's eye ever and not be able to know how to dissect or recognize it consciously, effectively making that breakthrough like it never really happened in the first place.
The part that stood out to me in that respect was when you said that your eyes lifted up to the neighbor's window.
Mm-hmm.
And that stood out to me because it was as if you kind of had a mental sense of actually moving, like you said, moving your gaze around.
Yes, it did feel like that.
Let's say that dream example was the standard. How close was it to that?
Pretty close, actually. Yeah, like I feel like I can still remember what it looks like very clearly. It feels more stable. It feels like the same way that I've processed things, and like I can remember what things look like and where things are in space.
Mm-hmm.
But like it feels like I can like hold that image more closely and for a longer time.
So now we have this sense for her kicking in where she could kind of mentally gaze about a scene and she could feel her mental eyes, so to speak, darting around to different areas. And at this point, she had expressed more stable visualization than she was ever used to before, or at least visual components to her thoughts. So we progressed forward, and at this point, I really started to feel, I remember feeling like, I wonder if she had more visualization coming into the program than she was aware of to begin with, and that very well could be. It's just that our measurement methods around this stuff is really hard to pin down sometimes exactly what somebody is experiencing on their end, which is why I did the pre-interviews in the first place. So then in session 2, we proceeded to do an exercise of a longer memory streaming session. She picked a memory from Jamaica. It was an especially fond and tactile memory. And after we finished the exercise, we debriefed it, and she described certain elements of the memory being so much more tactile than she was used to, and also getting the sensation like she was back there in that place. I'll let you hear it from her in her own words.
I feel like the tactile things were much more vivid than I'm used to. Like it really felt like I was there. The grass there is like different. It's like, yeah, and also the colors. Like the colors were more vivid. Yeah, it does feel like I can really see it because it's different than non-Caribbean waters. Felt like a 5. Yeah, like a 5 or a 6.
Wow, that's pretty high. That's awesome.
Yeah. Dude, I feel like giddy right now.
So for Angelina at this point, the challenge didn't seem like generating mental imagery. It actually seemed like allowing her conscious mind the ability or space to accept and recognize the mental imagery that was taking place. Her mind was definitely fighting her a bit on these thoughts and how they were occurring. And she expressed this creeping up feeling like she was questioning whether or not she was making the whole thing up. And that sensation's really hard to navigate. I find, here's a little aside, but I feel like it's an important one. I find that as kids, we don't have that same sort of process of like overly analyzing things, and we just kind of accept the things that happen. We're much more sponge-like at those early ages. And as we grow older, we develop this kind of overly analytical portion to ourselves that can be very beneficial, but also to our detriment. And the strange tension with this question, am I making it up, is that really mind's eye is completely subjective in the first place. So only you can experience and verbalize and determine what type of experience you're having and the interpretation of that experience. So it's an entirely internal experience in the first place, and you're the only one that can interpret it accordingly. And I'll always point out to my clients, like, if there's something that is different enough to cause you pause to even think in the first place, was that different? Then it probably was different, and it's worth digging into and exploring how it was different. And in there lie the breakthroughs. So at this point, through the memory streaming exercise, her mind's eye had just kind of clicked on, and she was feeling super giddy about it. And now here is where Angelina's experience deviated from the norm of the case study, but not only that, it deviated from anything I'd seen before and really anything I've seen since. Through our email correspondence after session 2, she let me know that there sort of seemed to open a dam of sorts, and a deluge of not only mental imagery started coming to her, but also some emotions that apparently needed to be processed and recognized. It seemed we had undone a buckler of sorts on the dam of some of that stuff. And via email, she expressed that she needed a few days to kind of rest, relax, take a pause, and I was happy to give that to her. She also expressed that she was heavily leaning on her own training and also her community, which we made sure that she was comfortable and had in place beforehand. And we both decided here, in the interest of her well-being and process, that it would be best to call off the rest of the sessions for the case study and allow her ample time to sort of process out everything that she needed to. Luckily, she didn't experience her mind's eye activity that was opened up as entirely unpleasant. She was actually kind of enjoying the process and dealing with things as they came. A short time passed, I think it was about 3 days or so, and we decided to chat again. She was feeling well enough at that point to continue chatting. And she told me that her mind's eye continued to be available and usable just at will.
It feels like my mind's eye is just on now. Since then, I've done a couple of meditation visualization things. I can start to build more of the scene in detail. So here's a beach or here's a mountain, and I want to put these trees on it, and I want to be able to walk in this way or fly in this way or whatever I want to do. And yeah, so that's been really cool.
And this type of progress was really unparalleled from anybody I'd worked with up until that point and since. So while Angelina's experience in the case study was, one, very exciting and a lot of progress was made, it was also a good cautionary tale, almost a harrowing one, of what can happen if the mind's eye opens up too much or too quickly, or there's stuff underneath the surface that maybe needs to be dealt with first. And I've only seen this sort of thing twice, as a matter of fact, not just her. There was one other person who had a similar sort of experience, just less dramatic. And both of them were very aware that their experience of aphantasia may have had something to do with previous trauma in their lives. So take that as a warning that if your experience of aphantasia may be linked to some traumatic events from earlier in your life, and you still want to open up your mind's eye, make sure that you have a lot of support around you, and even professional support if possible. This also goes without saying, but if you have a history of familial mental illness, such as bipolar or schizophrenia, please tread very, very carefully. Not only could training this open up stuff that's undesirable in the mind's eye, it could also be detrimental in other ways too. And coincidentally, Professor Joel Pearson just released a video about last week talking about this very cautionary point. So shout out to Professor Pearson over at the University of South Wales. Him and his team have done a lot of work in terms of aphantasia, mind's eye, and different things like that. Make sure to check out his stuff too. So all in all, Angelina's experience in the case study was a positive one. Not only did she have some pretty drastic mind's eye breakthrough, but she was also able to process through some emotions that apparently needed to be processed. And at this point in the 2020 case study, we're 3 for 3. 3 people out of 4 have experienced something new. Now, of course, this is a YouTube video, so don't forget to like, share, subscribe, comment if you want to support what I'm doing here. Also, if you want to get in touch with me, you can jump on my website, join my newsletter, send me a message, or jump into my Discord server where you can connect with other like-minded individuals. Now, in the next video, I'm going to be wrapping up this 2020 series with the 4th participant's experience. So, see you there.